Today I'll be discussing Another Evening in the Club, a short story written by Alifa Rifat. An idea that needs to be taken into consideration while reading the short story is the fact that the power the males have on women in Egypt. This regards to any male figure throughout the story. Alifa Rifat was a very controversial Egyptian author. Her short stories mainly reflect on the lives of traditional Muslim women in rural Egypt. One point that was strongly focused upon was the rights of women and inequality between males and females. I think Alifa Rifat's life really does play a major role in what people should pick up from this story, as Alifa did want to go to university, but her choice was repelled by her parents because they planned an arranged marriage for her without taking her opinion in the matter. As a woman who faced first-hand struggles of living a life that is controlled and required to cover the expectations given by the men in her life, despite this short story, Another Evening at the Club, being a fiction, the story reveals the truth of what women face on a daily basis in Egypt. Before getting way too deep into the analysis, a vivid explanation of the story is that it's based upon two different classes that merged through a set-up marriage by the father of Samia and Aboud Bey, a wealthy man. With their set marriage, a decision made with Samia having zero say in it began by Samia reminiscing about when her husband Aboud Bey bought her a ring for her birthday prior to the marriage. In the present time of the story, at the time the story takes place, Aboud Bey took Samia out to a club where she was, quote, required to drink. The word choice displays male dominance, given that Samia came from a presumably low class and religious family, as his power dominated her faith. The word required further illustrate Aboud Bey's dominance, as the word choice does not give Samia a choice, but rather is forceful, forcing her to drink in this case. As the night continued, Samia was wearing her ring. When she got back home, she placed it beside her bed, despite being a little tipsy. The next morning, Samia woke up not finding the ring beside her. After being very paranoid, she looked around and she did not find it. Therefore, she decided to wait for her husband to deal with the situation, as he substituted her father, a quote I'll be talking about later on. As the story went on, Aboud Bey came back home and called in Ghazia, the maid, as she was the only one who entered the room. With no respect to the maid or trust, Aboud Bey stated, "You've got just 15 seconds to say where you've hidden the ring, or else I swear to you, you're not going to have a good time." He then called the police and slapped her across the face due to not believing her. Aboud Bey's actions towards Ghazia identify his authority over a female. After the police took her over, on page 250, Aboud Bey was talking to the superintendent of police and told him, "I'll leave the matter to you, in your capable hands. I know your people have their ways and means." This is another example of an external character that has a very minor role, still being a powerful, dominant male figure, using their power over a woman, as he admits to beating her up later on the page, something a female could have never done to a male. Despite accusing Ghazia, as the day went on, Samia found the ring in her room and went and told Aboud Bey. Aboud Bey dealt with the situation as usual, as the male is the one that is relied upon to deal with events like this, and decided to trade in the ring in order not to look bad, leaving the girl with the blame in front of everyone else. As you can see, Aboud Bey decided to trade the ring in order to find and put himself in a better position, as he had the dominant power in order to do so, something a female could have never done to a male. Alifa Rifat's writing the story in fiction is just a perfect example that displays the lack of power and freedom that a woman has, as Alifa Rifat would have definitely never been able to publish such a story if it were non-fiction, as it would have made her husband look bad. Therefore, he would have never let her do so. So putting this story in fiction was just a perfect way to protect herself. Despite being in fiction, the story is still full of examples of how male figures have authority over women. In regards to Aboud Bey, the fact that he is the one who decided how to deal with the issue of the ring shows that Samia knew her role, as she had to wait for Aboud Bey to come back home from work, and he is the one who decided what to do. In regards to Samia's father, a quote he stated on page 255 states, "As from today, she will be at home in readiness for your happy life together, God permitting." And at a glance from her father, she hurried off to join her mother in the kitchen. This quote identifies how Samia's father did not take her opinion into account, and how her father chose to almost hand Samia like an object over to Aboud Bey despite only being in secondary school. At such a young age, it is very common in Egyptian society to be handed over to a male. As you can see, this is clearly one figure, being a male, handing over Samia to be almost under the command of another. The diction used in this quote even shows that Samia knew what she had to do, as she hurried off to join her mother in the kitchen. This quote also shows how Samia was expected to stay at home in readiness just to wait for her husband, as she would be required to take care of the house and be in control of the house just for Aboud Bey. One more thing that can be taken into consideration from this quote is how Samia hurried off to join her mother. And her mother was very insignificant to the role played to this story in deciding anything for Samia, as it was up to the males to decide what occurs. This could make you predict that Samia will also have a very minor role in what occurs to the children of Samia and Aboud Bey. After finding the ring in the story, an example of almost handing Samia from one man to another is also identified through another quote on page 259. It states, he gently patted her on the cheeks. It was a gesture that she had long become used to, a gesture that promised her continuous security, that told her that this man, who was her husband and the father of her child, had also taken the place of her father, who assured that he found her a suitable substitute. In this quote, he admits that she is being handed over to someone else. She is being treated like an object and a responsibility being given from one man to another. The pat on the cheek is very similar to the slap on the face, as it visualizes the power of men upon women, also shown in the slap that Aboud gave to the maid. With all this related to the main topic and idea of the story and how male figures have some sort of power on women in Egypt, there are some imagery and symbols that represent the same idea. A symbol brought up in the story is at the final page of the book. On page 260, it states, "Those floating islands of Nile water lilies that are rootless are swept along with the current." The visual image of water lilies being swept along the current by the water symbolize a woman in a society and how they are being controlled and swept, while the current represents all male dominant figures. Water lilies are known to be rootless, and despite having minor roots stuck to the ground, women may seem as if they are free in an Egyptian society, but they are almost single-handedly controlled by a male in one way or another. Therefore, the water lilies symbolize women and how they may seem to be free human beings, but they are really being pushed by men in every way in their lives. who are represented through the current of the wind on the Nile, who push the water lilies in any direction. While reading Another Evening at the Club, there are many symbols and literary devices, as well as quotes that supported the fact that males have a major dominant role and power over females in their society. Thank you.